Welcome everyone, thanks for joining us for the latest episode in our Dissected series. Today we're looking at the 41-pound Ari Nebo Peak, a 140-150 mil SL category e-bike, starting at $59.99 and topping out at $79.99. Before we get any farther, some of you might be saying, Ari, who the heck's Ari? If you remember, there was a bike brand named Fezzari, and they've opted to rebrand, come out with a new name and logo, and keeping the heart and core of the Fezzari ethos. The name has changed, but the bikes and the DNA and the pedigree remain the same. One of the big goals was to have a very light bike. Fully carbon fiber, rear triangle, front triangle, rocker links, everything is made out of carbon, and the goal again was to keep this bike light, playful, and fun. Our size large weighs in at 41 pounds in this top spec build, and the XL we were told weighed just over 41 pounds, not I think 41.25 pounds. So really impressive for kind of what you're getting, I'd say. It has a 430 watt-hour battery. You have to remove that sort of rubber bottom guard. I don't want to call it a skid plate really. I guess it's kind of more of like a rubber down tube protector to pull that battery out. There is a charge port here, so you can charge the bike with the battery installed. Fazua drive unit with their controller and little LED display here that flips up, giving you access to the USB-C port. Something that is different for this Ari bike compared to previous generation and previously branded Fezzari bikes is the move of their GA or geometry adjust link. That has left the shock area and is now down at the chainstay. And essentially what that does is now allows riders to change bottom bracket height, geo at the front end, but also gives them a short and long chainstay length. So you've got 435 or 440 mils. Speaking of geometry, we'll flash up to this geo chart here, but overall I'd say pretty well rounded, and I think geo numbers that are going to keep a wide range of riders happy. The 65-degree head tube angle, 77.5-degree seat tube angle definitely puts you in a pretty well-rounded and normal zone, you could say. They do run full 1.5-inch top and bottom headset bearings, so you can easily adjust that if you want to go with a different angle set to adjust any of those angles further, reach, or anything else. So that was some cool foresight and thought in allowing this bike to be customized. We could see a lot of people wanting to put this into a 160 fork and slacken that head tube out a bit, or even run it a little bit steeper depending on where they ride and how they ride. Ari's crew were not only focused on making a light bike, obviously they wanted a bike that rode well and was quiet and performed. So they took time to craft a couple of different features into the bike, one of them being a full tube-in-tube routing structure, and it actually runs against the side of the inner wall of the frame, and so far it has done an incredible job, as well as the acoustics. Really, I don't know what sort of like sound deadening or the frame, but the way that they have been able to protect this drive unit inside the frame has made it one of the quietest Fazua drive units, which are already quiet, but this thing is like nuclear sub-quiet. Like you can't even hear it. No cable rattle. They also put a pretty cool and new chainstay protector on there that does a good job of minimizing any rattle or noise down at the back of the bike. And moving from there into the suspension, Ari will continue using the TetraLink suspension platform, which is essentially, their version of a horse-link platform. So pretty standard expectations and performance out of a horse-link rear end. Fezzari does do a little bit of work to customize tuning, progression, kinematics. They did want this bike to have a little bit more progression and ramp towards the end of the stroke. They were able to modify that initial leverage rate. So the bike is designed to have a little bit more of a descending and downhill bias when it comes to the suspension tune and platform, which is something we really like, especially on a bike that's got a drive unit. We're willing to sacrifice a little bit of pedaling efficiency for just that suppleness off the top, and a bike that just kind of lets that rear end move a little more freely and get out of the way. But obviously some folks really prioritize pedaling efficiency, and yeah, I would say this bike doesn't pedal inefficiently in any way. And of course, you've got the lockout switch if you want to eke out even more performance. But overall, we've been pretty impressed with the nice blend of uphill and downhill performance. Speaking of uphill performance slash battery range, one of the big things that we talked about with Ari is developing a new e-bike, right? And working with drive unit partners. You really have to spend a lot of time working and developing a frame together.
One piece that's been really interesting in developing e-bikes is how critical that relationship with your electronics drive unit manufacturer is. And we had gone down the route of 4 other motor systems before we decided on Fazua. Like, we had drawings built, we went to the point of, other than cutting molds, we had everything done on 4 prior systems. But it wasn't really until we rode Fazua, we felt what that could do on the bike, you know, that we really decided, yeah, that's the direction we need to go. And then from there, we were able to move pretty quickly, you know. So that was kind of an interesting piece of that process. So
beyond riding performance, I guess, were there other things that you as a brand consider when opting to spec a drive unit on your bike?
I mean, ride performance is definitely, you know, the primary characteristic. How does that bike feel? Serviceability is a big piece too, right? Can you get parts for it if you need it? How is that going to be supported long term? You know, that's a question we're definitely considering. But how does it package into the bike too? That's a kind of a big consideration piece for us. You know, if you had a massive boxy square drive unit that got in the way of like your main pivot, that, you know, and you have to build your suspension around the drive unit instead of defining the suspension kinematic you want and then being able to add power. So there's those pieces too. We really like how the Fazua system is packaged, how it's assembled. And then in the lightweight category for us, power to weight ratio was a big one too.
One thing that we have noticed is the Fazua drive units really seem to offer, one, probably some of the best power in the SL category, but the efficiency. They claim to get about 34% more range with about 16% larger battery size. So with a 430 watt-hour battery, you're able to get quite a bit more range than a similar or you know, even slightly bigger or smaller sized bike that has a different drive unit, just purely based on the efficiencies.
I know this drive unit is still new, but it might be one of the quietest.
So before we dive into our first impressions of the bike, we're going to really quickly touch on the 3 models available. Again, there's price points from $59.99 up to the top spec here, which is $79.99. The entry-level Nebo Peak is the comp. The next step up is the Peak Elite at $69.99 with a Lyric Select Plus. Moving into our Pro model, it retails for $79.99, has a Lyric Ultimate, the Super Deluxe Ultimate with SRAM's XO transmission, the SRAM Maven Silver brakes, and DT's M1700 wheel set. Now, how does the bike ride? Of course, this is a dissected feature and something that we make in partnership with the brand. We want to be as upfront and honest with you guys as possible. We don't have a lot of time on it. Most of it was just ahead of the release of the bike. What I can say is, so far, the bike is a lot of fun. I'm impressed with how light it feels. I mean, at 41 pounds, it is a pretty light bike. Lifting it up off the ground to pre-hop stuff, if you come out of a corner and there's a little compression and you want to just give a little squash and yank the bike up. There was a couple of times where I was pretty thankful for these new Maven brakes, that like I went too deep and landed basically where I should have been starting a corner, and I was able to just slow the bike down. All that to say, the bike gets off the ground. It's very sprightly and lively. There were a couple sections where, like, as I'm just gonna be riding it and tuning it more, I'll be playing with rebound and air pressures a little bit. You know, some of that like kind of fast, lively activeness resulted in me wondering if maybe the rebound was a hair fast. I think I also have a little too much pressure in the tires, just because I don't really run this particular tire all that much, the Dissectors. So I was a little worried, even though it is a double down in XO Plus. You know, we're in some pretty rocky and chunky terrain, and I had a feeling we'd be going fast on this bike with the conditions out here today. So I think there's still things that we want to learn. the general public is actually going to really like this bike. I also think the discerning shredder is going to really like this bike. There's a lot of things you can do to customize it and change it up if you're that sort of a rider, right? Going with the 56 mil headset cups to be able to adjust reach, headset angle if you want to do that, going up to a 160 with a burlier fork if you want to. But at the same time, if you just want a 150, 140, 29-inch wheeled lightweight e-bike, this is just a great, fun, all-around trail rig so far. I would say that the frame stiffness is definitely pretty solid. It gives a good amount of snap out of the corners. It lets you hold a line, doesn't beat you up. But that's one spot I want to work on, just with tire pressure and suspension settings. I don't think that there's any weak link there yet. It's just a matter of time, right? And the more we ride it, the more trails we ride it on, and the more we get to know it, we'll really learn the nuances of it. But as far as like a first impression, there's, I think, some great potential in this bike, and I'm very excited to ride it and put more miles in it for our long-term review, and of course, that SL shootout that we'll be putting on later in the year. So thanks very much to Ari for getting this bike to us ahead of launch and putting some time on it to create this video for you guys. If you have any questions, things you would like to ask us, we can answer them now, or things you want us to focus and keep in mind for the long-term review, please do that. We really want to make sure we bring you as much value as possible in those long-term reviews and answer the things that you just can't do, right, through the internet. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, ask any questions, check out our merch store. We got a lot of new stuff and we'd greatly appreciate the support. See you out on the trails.